here at the HIT Lab in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Stephanie Richardson and Tim Patton. And today we want to share some thoughts with you on work-life balance and how to manage your time effectively. One of the most challenging aspects that I see people deal with is how to manage their time. And I think there's really a myth of work-life balance, because if it were truly a balance, we would spend an equal amount of time doing everything in our life. And that's not possible. It's not humanly possible to do that. And so I think what's more important to keep in mind is that you give the appropriate amount of time to several different areas of your life that you focus on. So that way there's balance in each of those areas rather than just focusing on work. For example, you may be crushing it in your work goals, but if your relationships are falling apart at home, then there's lack of balance. So I would love to know, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that leaders face with work-life balance in the organizations you work with, Tim?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm guilty. I want to start with that because honesty is the best policy. So I am not the greatest at it. I know what needs to be done, and I will speak to my personal life first. You know, it's really difficult to be driven like some of us are and want to just win and succeed and help others succeed. So sometimes that will overflow into your personal life. And I get talked about frequently from my wife as she will point out the fact that I'm still in the office late in the evening and she's ready for me to come out of my hole. So working from home and on the road, you know, will have its advantages from time to time. But I noticed that as the changes have occurred within the post-COVID era, or when it came about, we all went virtual, you know, so that's one of the major changes in the shifts within the industry and business in general. Those that survived had to figure out how to do so working, you know, at a distance from each other. So, you know, fortunately, I've been in the tech industry and some other industries as well. At that time, we were working in the tech industry, and pivoting a tech team should be the easiest thing in the world. So they did a great job. And as I said, you know, if we can't do it, nobody can, because we had all the tools at our disposal. But getting into how people balance at home, I mean, those that work, there's two different camps, I guess. And those that work, I'll address the virtual offices first. Those are really hard. Some people don't want to work in that environment because they know that they are better off working in an office environment, because not only for productivity, it could be because they have kids at home. So I think that's something that as a business owner, as a leader, that you need to identify. You need to know your staff, know their habits, know their families. And you can't do that with everybody as a company gets bigger, but you need to understand that needs are different. And when we're talking about how you overcome that in business, I mean, it's really tough. You know, on the personal level, it's easier to preach it to others, as we always say. But I think to answer your question, you know, few of the things that you can do is really try to set that time aside. And we've all heard it. We've all said, yeah, it's common knowledge. But for me, it's knowing that I need to be out of the office unless it's an emergency at a certain time. Sometimes there are emergencies and we deal with that in business, but knowing that you have to balance your family life because they support you. They are there for you. They're there to help you and your success. And so hopefully you've got someone like I do that will speak very frankly with you, and they'll tell you the truth and tell you when you're out of line. And therefore you just make plans to get back in line. And as far as the work balance, you know, I think you need to mix those two carefully, you know, and have some separation between the two. It's really tough.
Sometimes I think it's hard for people who are driven, like you said, to know when to turn that off, when to close the laptop, shut the door to the office if you're working from home, and stop. And author Roy Vaden, who wrote the book Take the Stairs, talked about in a study that employees self-admitted that they wasted about 2 hours a day. So you think about that. Not only is that costing a company a lot of money per year per employee, but if you actually didn't waste those 2 hours a day and you used those 2 hours to finish up your work, then maybe a lot of times we wouldn't make excuses about, I don't have time for exercise, for example, which is the one that a lot of people say. I don't have time to work out.
Yeah.
I don't have time to do XYZ, right?
Yeah. I think I'd add to that and say that as a leader, business owner, being clear in those things, whether it's with your spouse or whether it's with your teammates or with your staff, you need to be clear and transparent about the expectations. Gary Vee, I was watching him a few days ago. I follow him on social media, and some like him, some don't, but I think he makes a very valid point. He said one of the things he hates the most are leaders that have the expectation that their employees will do as much as they do. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's really important to say, because no one is going to work as hard for your business as you do. That's important to understand as an owner. You can't expect anyone to do the things you do because you live it, you built it, you're growing it, and it's part of you. So I think that's something that has to be pointed out. Where do we draw the line? Productivity. If you have clear expectations, you have a clear understanding of what is going on in your organization, what your goals are, what your vision is, and everybody's working together, I don't think you're going to have as many problems like that as you would think if you got your act together with the culture internally.
Right. Absolutely. I feel like there are 6 areas that a person really wants to look at when they're looking at balance in their life, because my background as a therapist is that many times people will, as I said earlier, crush it in business, but then they're lacking in their relationships or their finances or their spiritual growth or their personal growth, right? Or their health and fitness. And so you have to look at putting those, what I call them, my 6 non-negotiables. Those are the 6 areas of my life that I need to put in my calendar some way, somehow, every day.
Yeah. And I know you see it with your clients every day. How much success do you have with them, I would ask, in coaching, professionals that are aggressive and are go-getters and they're like a racehorse that's ready to run, and how do you go at them and kind of keep them in the right mindset?
So I think the accountability piece is what's critical, just like your wife.
Okay, that's a fair deal.
Holding you accountable. I'm that accountability piece for them. So I have clients that text me at 4:45 in the morning to say, I'm up. And I know that means that they're up doing their exercise and they're doing their reading and things like that as part of their morning routine. So that accountability piece is really what I have seen that helps people develop those habits so that I can eventually step out of that and they do that on their own without me. But it's reminding them, okay, this is something you said you value, right? Is exercising and making time for it. So what can we do to hold you accountable to that? Or date night. So many of my clients, they want to spend time with their spouse. Maybe they have small children, but they've got to figure out how can we invest in each other, right? And so just my asking them, when's your date night this month? What have you had scheduled? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Those kinds of things, that accountability piece really helps them be successful. And because it's an area they want to improve on. They just don't have anyone to help them be accountable to it. So that's the part that I offer.
I agree. And I'll tell a story, let a little insight into my personal life. When COVID started, my wife and I made a conscious decision to turn the TV off. We canceled our satellite, and people will look at us like we are out of our minds. And we don't watch the news. We don't watch, those things that most people do. And we found that since we both agreed upon it and we both established those guidelines, then we were able to do it. And I think it was just a test at the beginning to see if we're going to really follow through with it. And we left the satellite on for maybe a month or so. And then we realized that it was a waste and we turned it off. And some people would say there's no way I could do without that. But my point in that is you may not do that, but you may find that change is easier than you think, as long as you have accountability and agreement upon whatever it is you want to change.
That's funny because I don't have it either at my house.
Oh, really?
Haven't had it for probably over 10 years at least.
You know what we found is that was our time. And as you pointed to, the work-life balance, we chose to give each other that time during that era. And it just stuck. And we found that we didn't need it. And we found that we were doing other things and spending time outside and, with the kids or with the dogs or whatever it may be. And I think that's important to understand that just, something that we've always had and always thought was so important. And it was such a thing, almost like our phones, we feel like we've got to have them in front of us. It's easier to make those changes once you get it in your head that you're going to establish those rules.
I think we saw when COVID first hit, we saw a lot of families making those decisions to invest more time in each other and really assess how much time am I spending with my family. I know in my neighborhood, I saw more families walking together, biking together, and doing things than I had seen in several years, because they valued that, and they stopped and said, wait a minute, something has been missing, right? And I need to put this back in. And so I think that that's something good that came out of COVID.
Yeah, and you will see the statistics if you ever look at those, or if you're like me, I'm an avid hiker. I love to climb mountains. I love to get outside and do trails. And when COVID kind of went full force, the places that people could go, they did go. They got out of the house and had to get some, interaction with something. If it wasn't with each other outside in the community, they were doing it with nature. And so you had a huge increase. And, I wish I could roll back time and invest in that industry at that time, because there were more tents, sleeping bags, hiking boots sold during that period than any time before. Because of those needs that people have. So I would say that the need to have that fulfillment within the family is important, but it's also important within the organization, and having a connected group of people within the organization and having connected mentors and connected business partners that you can rely on and exchange ideas with is critical, because your success sometimes may rely on input from someone that knows more than you about a particular subject. So never feel like you know it all. I laugh when I always say that, 8 out of 10 business owners think they've got everything right, and the other 2 just don't know it yet. That's really how we are. So
we can learn so much from each other. And, if there's someone on your team that you feel like has better balance in their life than you do, then go to them and ask them, hey, what are some tips or suggestions you have? I'm struggling with this, right? How can I feel like I have better balance in my life? I don't want to feel like I'm working all the time. I want to make sure that the people in my life feel valued and that I'm spending enough time with them, that I'm valuing myself and taking care of myself, both physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, right? And so that's really what we're going to talk about next, as one of those 6 non-negotiables that I mentioned, personal growth. Tim is going to lead us through some thoughts on that in our next episode. So thank you, Tim, for sharing today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We're coming to you again from the HIT Lab in Nashville, Tennessee.